Hello, my friends. My name is Darren Gerdes. If you're looking for Ukraine war news, you found it. This is the Daily Brief. 1,180 Russians off the battlefield, so it's still hot, but only 4 tanks, 18 armored combat vehicles, 35 artillery pieces, 58 vehicles, and fuel tanks. If you look at Andrew Perpetua's list, it looks like it's about 2 to 1, 48 Russian assets destroyed, 24 Ukrainian assets destroyed over the last 24 hours. Russia hits the civilian infrastructure of Kharkiv with air bombs. That's nothing new, but this is something that happened yesterday as well, so it's being reported. Local media reports that columns of smoke are rising over the city and that the city has been shelled with KA-B aerial bombs. And that's been an ongoing thing, but it's still going on. 5 killed, dozens injured in Russian missile attack on Ukraine's Pokrovsk. Officials say the town near the Eastern Front was hit by 2 Iskander-M missiles fired 30 minutes apart. At least 5 people were killed, 41 injured, including 4 children. Now, the fascinating thing is the Russians were squawking to high heaven yesterday about the damage inflicted in Sevastopol, with near the beach where civilians were hurt, and including children, and the U.S. missiles, and they're doing the same thing to Ukraine, and not, I mean, it's okay there. This is one of the largest enemy attacks on civilians recently, and the area Pokrovsk is really interesting as well. Ukraine's General Chief of Staff said that 1/3 of all Russian attacks along the front line take place at Pokrovsk sector only. And Sergei Sumlimi says, guess what sector? I'm bringing drones right now, funded by a joint campaign by Euro Resistance and a number of other places. And all these efforts are very important. I know that Greg Terry will be he's physically on his way back to Ukraine right now, and we'll be back to another fundraiser before too long. We already have that in the works. And here is where this region is, if you're looking for Pokrovsk. Now, Pokrovsk this is where the salient is, where Russia's been really pushing forward. And this is an area where if you can control this highway, you really can do some damage to how the Ukrainians are able to support themselves. And so they really want to take that. Okay, this is incidental. This little article I saw about ships in Azov. I talked about how they were firing from the Sea of Azov, thinking that they're protected there, I guess. There are 7 enemy ships in the Sea of Azov, 2 of which are carriers of caliber cruise missiles with a total salvo of up to 16 missiles. Russia continues to violate the 1974 International Convention for the Safety of Life at Sea by turning off automatic identification systems. Of course, they want to not be identified and not be able to be spotted. And of course, they're also being seen regularly on satellites, so I don't know what good that's doing exactly, but okay. 2 Russian Pantsir-S1 Air Defense systems were destroyed in Kharkiv front. Air reconnaissance unit of the 3rd Spartan Brigade discovered the positions of the Russian anti-aircraft systems, and missile forces unit opened up on them. And this is another view of it. This says another, but I think it's one of the 2. As claimed by the source, this one is somewhere in the Donetsk region, so it could be a 3rd, but I think it's one of 2. The photo shows the destroyed Pantsir-S1 Air Defense System, MLRS strike. The missile hit nearby, as a result of which the complex burned out from the inside. No personnel were injured. Okay, the United States says Ukraine's success in war requires depriving Russia of advances in Ukraine's east and its impact on the economy. So there's 2 things that they need to do. They need to stop the Russians from moving forward. This is James O'Brien, U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for European and Eurasian Affairs, who said that Ukraine's success in the war is primarily requires depriving Russia the ability to advance, that's one, and to stop inflicting economic damage on Ukraine. You have to stop the sort of Russian attempt to nibble away at their way forward in the east. O'Brien also noted that this involves depriving Russia of the ability to use its close-in firing positions. Now, the Russians have been able to nibble their way forward because they had overwhelming artillery fire, and the Ukrainians had to sit on their artillery and only use it very sparingly until recently, and that's just changed. This can be achieved by adequately supplying Ukrainians with air defense systems. Then we come to the point where Russia has to go and think, can we go forward? right? That's what they're actually going for. Western arms reached the front lines, relieving some pressure. This just came out today. Western supplies of artillery shells, slowed by months of political wrangling in Washington before finally being released, have started to reach Ukrainian units on the front lines, relieving pressure on forces outnumbered by the Russians. In the past, soldiers said that they had been forced to limit their use of 155mm rounds against the enemy, compromising their ability to support infantry further forward. There was shell hunger. Ammunition was rationed quite severely. It had an impact on infantry. They, the Russians, crept from all sides. It hurt infantrymen. Now there's no more shell hunger, and we work well. But now the problem is, in the meantime, between actually getting the materials that they needed and the present time, they lost a lot of men, and they need to really make sure that they get the manpower issue back up, and they lost some ground along the way. This came out for some inexplicable reason today. Ukraine receives first ammunition within framework of Czech initiative, but they already got some of it, and so I don't know why they're saying this first shipment of ammunition from our initial initiative arrived in Ukraine some time ago. We're doing what it takes, Falia said. I don't know why this is here, but the Czechs were getting things there as well, and so God bless them for doing that. A new $150 million U.S. aid package for Ukraine will likely include much needed munitions for HIMARS and possibly more ATACMS, 155mm and 105mm shells, anti-armor weapons. That's not the only place. A second batch of Spanish Patriot missiles are already in Ukraine. Spanish sources said the Patriot missiles from Madrid's stockpile arrived in Ukraine on Friday as part of a first shipment of Madrid's latest military package for Ukraine. The EU rolls out a $1.4 billion with a B in frozen Russian assets for Kyiv. So the hits keep coming, and it reminded me of, I was talking to Greg Terry not too long ago. This was like about the time that the aid package had just been passed, the U.S. aid package, and we're like, okay, it's going to be a hard few months. It's going to be a really hard few months, and it looks something like this. This guy is in an excavator, and I showed a clip of something very similar to this. The Ukrainians, they have to get over this trench. Like they have this problem because there's a bridge of where they need to go, and they have to get over it, and once they get over it, it's not exactly smooth sailing, but they have to get over this trench. So let's watch this right now.
You want to go right up to the edge, put your boom
This is how an
out
excavator
over it,
gets over a trench,
lift yourself
and this
up
is
a
kind
little.
of what the Ukrainians had to do in the meantime. It's a really hard struggle in order to get where they're going.
Until you're on the other side. So see, I'm now completely over the trench. Swing over, keep walking back till you get to the edge. Put your bucket down, lift yourself up.
Again, that's the trench they're getting over.
Go right over.
And that's kind of what the Ukrainians have had to do for the last 2 months. They had a workaround. They couldn't really fight forward like you would hope that they would be able to. But again, this is where they are. Okay. Ukraine's military intelligence said it set fire to an ammunition depot in Russia's Voronezh Oblast. And where's Voronezh? We'll talk about in just a moment. Detonations at the munitions warehouse continue for at least 7 hours. If you're going to hit anything, hit a munitions warehouse. That's a great target. Ukraine's drone strikes at around 3 a.m. in the Voronezh district. Thousands of artillery shells were being stored there. Where is this? This is about, here's Kharkiv. That's where we're talking about, the Kharkiv to Voronezh. All right, NJ and Kiev's comment was more ammo that will never make it to Ukraine. And that's right. It will never be used to kill Ukrainians because it was destroyed there. Some interesting political news. Wind energy can partly compensate for the lost power generation, but so 10 gigawatt of lost traditional power is actually a little bit more than that, but nonetheless, they have potentially 4 gig in wind energy projects that are ready for implementation. But of course, Russia can blow up a wind turbine just like it can blow up a traditional power generation facility, and it's only replacing 4 of 10, but winter's coming and anything is going to be a net positive. Meanwhile, EU leaders have agreed to nominate Estonian Prime Minister Kallas to fill the post of the head of Eurodiplomacy held by Borrell. I think she'd be a great choice. She's all in support of Ukraine. Dmitry Medvedev is upset about sanctions. This came out just yesterday, the European sanctions. We will survive these new sanctions, but we won't forgive and forget. We've got a good memory. So what's Russia's response? Russia will block the broadcasting of more than 80 European media outlets in response to sanctions against Russian propaganda. So their response has become even more insular than they were before, which is kind of what authoritarians do. But much of what's going on could all be prevented. I am so sick, says Andrew Perpetua, of the U.S. saying that they aren't escalating the war. They're escalating the war by not providing the means for Ukraine to destroy all of Russia. Now that's a hard statement, but a means for Ukraine to really prosecute the war, it's just not there. It trickles in. Putin has shown that when he has no ability to act without direct, severe consequences, that he will opt to do nothing. You must give Putin the most severe possible consequences for every decision he makes so that he will give up and end the war. And that's the right way to prosecute it. Just trying to appease certainly doesn't work. So meanwhile, North Korea is escalating with South Korea, as they generally do. But this is almost a comical way of escalating compared to nuclear saber rattling. Balloon war continues. North Korea has sent another 350 balloons with waste to South Korea, according to CNN. According to the publication, since May, North Korea has already launched more than 1,000 balloons in response to the actions of South Korean activists who distributed leaflets criticizing the regime of Kim. So the South Koreans send leaflets into North Korea, and North Korea sends South Korea their trash. Okay, I mean, could be worse. Now I want to leave you with two pictures. This is the price of freedom. They're walking in a memorial. Each of these flags is memorializing fallen soldiers, and these two veterans, 2 legs lost and 1 leg lost. That is what freedom looks like. And then this is what childhood looks like growing up in a war zone. Look at the background. Is that what your neighborhood park looks like? It shouldn't look like that for anyone. All right, thank you for the time, my friends. Thank you for the likes, the shares, the subscribes, and thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.